I am headed to my friend JD's place today. We are going to attempt to make hard cheese from the raw cow's milk I got from my cows. Now, JD is a little more scientifically minded. He pays more attention to recipes and numbers and being precise than I do. We've had cows for about 2 years now, or coming up on 2 years. And we've gotten lots and lots of milk, we've gotten lots of cream, we've made our own butter, and I've made a lot of fresh cheeses, like farmer's cheeses, where you split the curds from the whey with an acid, like lemon juice, or vinegar, or balsamic vinegar, or apple cider vinegar. You know, you put a little acid in there, and it splits the curds when they're at a certain temperature, and then you strain it off, and sometimes I'll press it. I've also made some kefir cheeses that came out in various levels of tartness, sometimes so tart that they were inedible, and a little bit of yogurt cheese. We've done some experiments with that sort of thing, but I haven't done proper cheese, like a cheese that could be aged in a rind. I tried it and was not successful. Tried a couple of them and they ended up very, very hard because we had the wrong humidity and the wrong temperature. But JD has made what is called a cheese cave, which is an aging box that has the proper humidity and temperature to age cheese long term. The problem is that JD's cow is not producing enough milk right now to make cheese. So we have two cows that are in milk and are making 3 gallons a day. And so I have a lot of extra milk that we can use. So I'm bringing 5 gallons over today. And we are going to use JD's expertise and his experimentation in his cheese cave. And together the two of us are going to try and make some hard cheese. It's kind of one of those fun homestead things. I don't think there's anything better in the world to eat than a good, aged, sharp cheese. And that's what we're going to attempt to make. And if we could get cheese making down, well, that's one less piece of food that we have to buy. And it's a very high quality, storable, excellent nutrition food that fills you up. So through the lean months, having some cheese set aside and not having to buy cheese anymore, not having any artificial ingredients, but cheese from our own raw milk from cows grazed on unsprayed pasture, fed unsprayed food. That's some seriously good eats. So that's the setup for what we're gonna do today. And I figured since we're doing this, I might as well bring you along. Are we gonna be able to put all 5 gallons in here?
Only 4.
Okay, so we do 4 gallons and then we have to drink the last gallon.
We can make more cheese with it, a different kind of cheese. I'm just gonna...
Just, it wasn't meticulously strained?
Oh, trust me, it'll show up in the curd. If you can keep stirring, one, we want a uniform heat distribution throughout the milk, so one side's not colder or the top's not colder than the bottom. And then mostly because we don't want scalding on the bottom of the pan, because I hate cleaning pans. Ideally, we would have like a water bath where this pan would be inside a giant vat of water. We'd be heating the water, which would then heat that. We can get a much more gentle heat flow into the actual milk. But I don't have a big enough vat of water where I can precisely control the temperature, so we got to do it the caveman way. So this book doesn't have any actual cheese recipes in it, but it's great at going into the science and the chemistry of actual cheese making, so you can understand the why behind the recipe, and then once you understand the why, you can start making tweaks, or more importantly, you can actually troubleshoot and be like, hey, this cheese is rubbery, what did I do wrong? Okay, well, what were my pHs? How much Renet did I use? Or hey, this cheese dried out way too much in the cave. What could have possibly happened? So understanding the why in this book helps with the actual cheese making process. And then this book is what I use for my actual recipes. They have great soft cheeses, hard cheeses, and it's a great cookie cutter. Hey, I know nothing, I'm going to start here, and away I go. And it also dives into a little bit of the why and the processes, and then some troubleshooting techniques too. So we're going to be doing this recipe today, which is a farmhouse cheddar. except we're not going to be using the starter culture because we're using raw milk. So we're going to hope we have good bacteria inside our milk that will propagate a better flavor. And then this, while it is a cheddar, this recipe actually omits the cheddaring process, which will save us about 2 hours of time, which will affect the final texture of the cheese in a little bit, but we'll still get a good, quick farmhouse cheddar. And we are going to deviate at the bottom. The bottom tells us to wax it. We are not going to wax this cheese. We are going to be bandaging it. So we're going to wrap it in butter muslin or cheesecloth, coat it with a nice thick layer of fresh pig lard. And that pig lard is going to cultivate a whole lot of mold growth on the outside of that cheese, which will then allow the cheese to breathe better in the cave, give it a more flaky texture, but a much stronger, potent, delicious flavor. So what we want to do is we want to get the temperature of the milk up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to let it sit so that bacteria can grow, nice warm temperature for it. That bacteria is then going to start consuming the sugars, turning it into lactic acid, which is going to drive the pH down. Once the pH gets to what our recipe calls for, we're going to move on with the process of adding the rennet. We've been stirring the milk. We finally got it to a temperature above 90 degrees. It's about 94 right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the heat off. We're going to move the pot off of the burner, just so no residual heat gets into it. And we're going to put the top on. If you can hand me the top of the pan right there, just to minimize evaporative heat loss. And we're going to let this sit for about 45 minutes. And we're going to test the pH. In that time, it should be nice warm for the bacteria to grow, multiply, convert all the sugars into lactic acid, driving the pH down. And then once we get the pH low enough, we're going to add our rennet and let the actual curd separate from the whey. We've had the milk sit at 90 degrees for 45 minutes for it to ripen, the bacteria to start growing, and what's converting that lactic acid, or the sugars into lactic acid, driving the pH down. Now we're going to measure the pH of the milk. This specific recipe doesn't have a target pH, but I want to make sure that the pH is actually going down, so that way when we do add the rennet, it will actually coagulate. So what I did is I was too cheap to buy pH test strips, which would be the ideal way, but I'm cheap and I don't want to do it, and I had a red cabbage laying around. So what I did was I cut that red cabbage up, I steeped it in boiling water so we would get the chemical flavin out of it, which is going to be a pH indicator, and it's going to change color based upon the pH. The more acidic, the more red it's going to get. The more basic, the more blue it becomes. So milk is unfortunately white. So is the color going to change because of the pH or because I'm adding white to purple? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a control. I have 30 milliliters of this, and I'm going to put in enough milk out of my control. We'll start with about 10. Just going to mix it around, and it's a nice light purpley color. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same 10 milliliters out of my actual vat. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to see if there's going to be color difference in the two. It should be hopefully a lighter-ish purple, and a darker-ish purple, and it looks about the same. So I'm thinking that the red cabbage is not going to be a good way to actually tell the pH of milk because it's white. I have a quarter cup of cold unchlorinated water I got out of my water distiller, and I'm going to add half a teaspoon of liquid animal rennet to it. The main reason of this is you're just diluting the rennet so you can get more even distribution in the actual milk itself. And I'm going to stir it, make it as homogeneous of a solution as possible. And then we're going to top stir the milk for 5 minutes. I'm going to get the milk moving before I start adding in the rennet. I'm just going to slowly pour the rennet in, and we're going to top stir in an up and down motion for 5 minutes to make sure that the rennet fully mixes in the entire vat of milk. And I doubled the recipe, so we're going to double the rennet, so we need to do this one more time. Alright, so we got the second dose. Since I doubled the recipe, which we're going to continue to top stir in, I'm going to start my 5 minutes now. Okay, so now that we got the rennet, or diluted rennet, top stirred in for 5 minutes, we're going to let this sit for about another roughly 45-ish minutes till it coagulates and we get a clean break. And we'll show you what a clean break is once we get to that point. The milk's been setting, and you can see it's starting to form into whey and curds. This big white mass is actually a giant curd. And so we need to figure out if it's going to make a clean break or not. So we're going to stick our finger into it. We're going to pull up. And it's close to making a clean break, but it's still a little too... It's not quite there. It's not quite gelatinous enough. So we're going to let this sit for about 5-10 minutes longer and come back and recheck it. Alright, so we're going to stick the finger in at about a 45-degree angle. And we're going to pull it out, and when the curd separates in a nice clean line, that's what we call a clean break, which that is. So now we're going to cut it into 40 or half-inch cubes.
Oh yeah. Mixers are great.
Alright, now we're going to go 90 degrees, checker pattern. So now we're going to insert the knife at about a 45-degree angle. We're going to do something very similar where we're just trying to get those long rectangular pieces into actual cubes as best we can. Now we're going to put this back on the stove and we're going to heat it up to 100 degrees. Okay, so now we got the curds that are cut into about half-inch cubes back on the mix or on the pot, at least as close to half-inch as I could get, and then we're just going to slowly heat this the way up to cook the curds, wanting to do about 1 degree every 2 minutes. So we want to do it very slowly. We're going to heat it back up to 100 degrees. As the curds cook, they're going to shrink in size as they release more whey. And you want to be careful not to stir too vigorously, other words you'll cause a lot of butter fat to come out of the curds, which is what all the good stuff of the cheese is. Just want to be very gentle as we stir it, just to prevent the curds from clumping up in a giant mass. Alright, so we heated our whey up to 100 degrees. Now we're going to cover it and let it sit for 5 minutes. As the curds cook, they're going to leach more whey out and shrink up a little bit. And then after they sit for about 5 minutes, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to ladle the cooked curds into a cheesecloth. You can also just dump them into the cheesecloth and let the whey drain through with the colander on the bottom. I will eventually do, but I don't want to make a huge mess. Definitely be quicker to do it that way, but
I can't see your books.
we ladle out all the curd from the whey. I'm just going to hang it up to dry or drip the rest of the whey out of it.
Oh yeah, it does.
Alright, so the curd's done drying, so we're going to move it to the bowl.
I have a couple petals.
And then we're going to start breaking this up into about walnut-sized pieces, and then we're going to salt it. And we're going to mix the salt in thoroughly. Then we're going to take it to the press.
The first thing is true, so you take it out of it. Like the last is.
Try and salvage as many of them as we can. Then we're going to put one follower on it. Our second follower. Got our other block on there.
It's probably the burner. Maybe there's some like that's on the burner. Because I don't think that's
What we're going to do is we're going to apply 10 pounds of pressure.
John, do you want this on high?
Yes.
Not even on high.
Okay, so we had 10 pounds at 10 minutes. Now we're going to take this off. We're going to take the cheese out. We're going to flip it over. Try to do this without. Then we're going to repress it at 20 pounds. Thank you. We just pulled the cheese. Now we're going to put it back into the mold and we're going to repress it. This time is going to be pressed at 50 pounds for 12 hours. Good thing I'm fat. Alright, now we let it set for 12 hours.
That's the basic process, at least the beginning of making a farmhouse cheddar. So the cheese has got to rest overnight now for 12 hours. And because JD is super meticulous, he is actually going to get up at 3 a.m. and go to the next stage of the process. I'm not that meticulous, which is why I wanted him to be part of this cheese making. It's something that I've wanted to do properly, but I've been making shortcuts, and I make some pretty good fresh cheeses, but they're not like awesome aged cheeses. So the step-by-step meticulousness, that's awesome, and that's why we did it. So if you want to see the rest of making this cheese, this is it for me on my channel, but you can jump over and watch it on JD's channel. 12 hours from now, the continuation of this cheese making process will be on his channel. So I will put a link to that below, and I'll try to link it at the end screen of this video. You can go over to him, subscribe to his channel, and say hi. He's a really good guy. He's going to be doing a lot with his grazing animals and his homemade milking machine and his other various projects. He's much more of a mechanical inventor type guy than I am, so you'll find that interesting, I think. And anyhow, you can go subscribe to his channel and check it out. He'll put the rest of the video over there. And thank you for joining us today. Catch y'all next time. And until then, may your thumbs always be green.